So, welcome to Foster Care and Fashion. I am Dupree, and I am here with kind of a celebrity in the foster care world. This is Eugene Balloun, and you have been practicing law for how long?
Quite a while now, more than 60 years.
More than 60 years.
Yes.
And you have done some amazing things within the child welfare system. And I'm just going to name one, which is you performed over 1,000 adoptions for free.
Yes.
Okay. Now, back in
These are all adoptions of foster children.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very important distinction. So, but that was back in 2015. I believe the number was like 1,029. Do you have an accurate count?
It's over 1,300 now.
Over 1,300. That is beautiful, Gene. And you do it for free, and you donate the money to a scholarship fund, correct?
Yes, our firm has set up a scholarship fund, and so the fees that are paid by the state are then donated to the scholarship fund. As of this summer, when we make our scholarship awards, will be over $1 million that we've now been able to give in scholarships.
Whoa! And are these scholarships for people who have, ultimate resources and...
They're for anyone who's been in the state system in Kansas. So they're for foster and adoptive children who were adopted out of the foster care system.
Okay.
And it doesn't make any difference whether they have means or not.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make any difference whether they're going to four-year school, junior college, trade school, beauty school, whatever they want to do, we try to help them.
And so how do people apply for this?
Our funds are administered through the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation.
Okay.
And so they do all of the work, the paperwork for us and the handling of the funds.
Okay.
So the kids hear about it primarily through KVC, DCF, and other social welfare agencies, as well as through other foster parents. And then they submit a very brief online application, and then we try to help them.
Okay, I love it. So, Gene, how did you get started in the child welfare world? How did it all begin?
It all began when my wife and I were deciding whether or not we wanted to have children.
Okay.
And a friend suggested, why don't you try fostering some children? And so we decided that's what we would do. We took the foster parent training and then launched into our foster parent career.
Okay. And 29 children later.
Yes.
Right? You fostered
29 children later, foster children, we ended up having adopted two of those children.
Out of the foster care system.
Yes.
And so how did you know? How did you know that these were the two children that you were supposed to adopt?
When we became foster parents, we really didn't go into it with the attitude of adopting. And in fact, at that period of time, the attitude of the DCF and others was that if you want to adopt, don't become foster parents. That at that time, they discouraged foster parents from adopting. Fortunately and wisely, that has gone 180 degrees, and now most children who are adopted out of the system are adopted by foster parents.
So it's interesting because usually when a child enters into the child welfare system, into the foster care system, the goal is reintegration with parents,
right?
With birth parents, and we know that there's a timeline that parents have in order to reintegrate with their children. And if they're not successful, then the state files a motion for other forms of permanency, and then we go down that road. So if people enter into the foster care world with the idea of adopting, What do you think about that? Like, do you think that they should have that in mind, or do you think that after a certain point in the case, then they should have that kind of thought process?
Good question, and
Yeah.
hard one to answer. Just speaking from personal experience, when we started, we didn't have any idea of adopting children.
Right.
We were going to foster children, just see how we got along with that. Our very first child we got when he was 14 months, and of course, as is very common, we immediately fell in love with him.
Yep.
And
They're
then
fun at that age.
you started thinking, I can't give up this child. And so that you just sort of fall into that. And fortunately, we were able to adopt him, but not until he was 5 years old.
Wow.
And so
That
it
was
was
pretty long.
about a 4-year process. But ultimately, we did adopt him.
Okay.
He's now our 31-year-old son,
Yay.
married and with an 8-year-old granddaughter of
Wow.
ours. So, to answer your question, I've certainly seen folks go into foster parenting with the idea of, I won't adopt,
Right.
and many don't adopt. They stand by that belief that they don't want to adopt. On the other hand, there are people like us who go into it not particularly thinking they're going to adopt, but see that that's something that's would be good for them and for the child. And then there are others who go into it with the idea of, I would like to adopt a child. And sometimes they run into disappointments. I think about a foster parent who had 3 consecutive babies as foster children,
Okay.
thinking that she and her husband would like to adopt any one of the 3,
Okay.
but it never worked out.
Wow.
Relatives, reintegration,
Yep.
that sort of thing. And so there can be real disappointments
And
in that
heartbreak,
respect.
because
Heartbreak.
you fall in love with these kids.
You bet.
Yeah. Man. But we need foster parents, right?
No question about that.
We need foster parents, and we also need adoptive parents, because I believe the statistics are there are over 400,000 kids who are in the foster care system in the country, but there are about 100,000 who are waiting to be adopted.
Right.
So it's not as if there isn't a need.
And there are many parents who do adopt, and they get involved and say, I want to adopt.
Right.
And some of these children who are available for adoption then are considered
Right.
by them.
Right.
They don't foster, they just go into it with the idea
Oh, okay.
of, let's look, let's
Okay.
see whether there's a child here that we think we can connect with and adopt. So
That's
certainly,
interesting. Yeah.
you're right. I mean, we constantly need foster parents. We constantly need adoptive parents. And there is a big turnover in the foster parent world for a number of reasons.
What do you think those are?
Well, for one thing, there's, of course, foster parent burnout.
Right.
Some of the people just simply get tired out from the stress involved. And there is a roller coaster that you ride when you're a foster parent. There are lots and lots of ups and downs emotionally, and some people just burn out from the stress of that.
Okay.
Frequently, the reason people drop out as foster parents is because they've adopted.
Okay.
And if they adopt 1, 2, 3, 4, however many children they think they can handle,
Right.
then at the end of that time, they think, we just can't handle anymore.
Right.
And so they are no longer available as foster parents. So I think there's a variety of reasons. Probably the burnout and the adoption, the fact that families fill up by adoption, are probably the big reasons.
When you were fostering, when you and your wife were fostering, did you experience that burnout feeling? That
There were certainly times when we got pretty exhausted,
right.
and we never thought about dropping out.
Okay.
After we adopted our last child, our daughter, we did think that we were, not that we were burned out, but we were both getting a little older and it was getting tougher to handle smaller children on a full-time basis. And so we decided that we would quit actively taking children and just work in other areas of fostering.
So you've helped so many different foster families and you've been a foster parent as well. What do you think could be done to help foster families so that we don't have the burnout rate that we do?
Well, I think there are probably a lot of things that could happen. First of all, the system moves very slowly. As you mentioned a moment ago, there are timelines that are established not only by the federal law, but also by the state law.
Right.
Those are routinely ignored. And I don't mean ignored in a harsh sense. I mean that rather than get permanency in a child's life within a year, it often drags on for 2 or 3 years.
Absolutely.
Sometimes there are good reasons for that. Oftentimes it's difficult for me to understand why there is the delay. I think one of the things that would help not only foster parents, but more importantly, help the children is if the system could accelerate certain phases. For example, in my opinion, there is often too long of a time lag between the time a child comes into care and termination of parental rights, if that's the ultimate decision that's going to be made.
So do you mean when we know at the very beginning that reintegration is not viable, or
No,
are you saying they have a reintegration plan?
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying we should rule out reintegration because clearly what's best for a child is normally being reintegrated into their birth home.
Right.
If that's possible.
Right. Safely.
But,
right.
But I think what happens is that oftentimes birth parents are given too many chances. It's easier for the court system and the welfare system sometimes to say, well, let's just let it go another 60 days and see how things go. And at the end of 60 days, not much has happened. And then instead of saying, let's go ahead and start termination proceedings, then there's this inclination, well, let's try another 60-day period and see what happens. So there is that delay. That's one thing.
Okay.
There, on the other end of that, I see case after case after case why I can't understand the delay between the time of termination and permanent placement and adoption. I had an adoption of 3 children this week who've been in the adoptive home for 3 years.
Whoa.
They had been selected as the adoptive family for more than 2 years. So why are we just now doing the adoption?
What was the issue? Like, why?
I don't know the explanation
Okay.
as to why the system was delaying that. It wasn't the courts,
Okay.
because parental rights had long since
Been terminated 3 years
but
ago.
we do, and I've never tried to make a study of well, why is DCF or the contractor delaying the adoption here. Sometimes I think it's a product of paperwork, but
Okay.
even that shouldn't take that long.
Right.
Sometimes there's delay in completing home studies, for
Right.
example.
Right. And there's social worker turnover and
There is, and it was like that case. The same social worker had been involved for 3 years. That's probably the first time I've seen that.
ever in life.
Almost never, because there is a turnover.
Right.
And which is unfortunate.
It is.
Because the social workers are overworked and underpaid
Yep.
and have too much paperwork to do,
Yep.
and they suffer from emotional burnout.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was
Without
talking with a
question.
colleague of mine who is a case manager, and I was saying I feel like there needs to be a therapist on staff for social workers because
That's
they
right.
deal with trauma. I mean, it's
Exactly.
secondary trauma. They're dealing with it, and they have to process this. And you know, you can only take so much of people being upset at you, like
Right.
especially when you're dealing with that like day in and day out. It can be, I mean, it can be exhausting. So
No question.
yeah, therapist on staff. We need to do that.
Other delays are within the system in trying to find appropriate homes for children who are on the way to adoption.
Okay.
And I think there's some things that can be done in that respect. By way of disclaimer, I'm on the board of Foster Adopt Connect.
Me too.
Just, just as you. And but one of the programs, as you well know, that has been developed there is the Extreme Recruitment
Right.
Program,
Love it.
where there is an intensive search for relatives, even remote relatives,
Yep.
who are willing to get involved in the child's life. The state does not have the resources to make the kind of intense study that Foster Adopt Connect has been making.
Because they
With
actually hire a detective.
That's right.
Like it's a whole team of people.
A whole team of people,
Yeah.
social workers, a detective, and others who make this intense study. Whereas the state system looks for relatives, but that doesn't go much beyond the immediate extended family.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like, hey, is there anyone who's available? And
If
then
there's no aunt or uncle,
That's
then
about
that's,
it.
that's about it.
right.
But I think a program like Extreme Recruitment, either developed through the state directly or by contracting with someone like Foster Adopt Connect,
Right.
could get some of these children placed much faster. And in the long run, of course, it would save the state a tremendous amount of money
Absolutely.
in doing that. I think another factor that would help in terms of keeping children out of foster care, because that is one of the big problems we face now, the increasing number of children coming into foster care, is another program that was developed by Foster Adopt Connect, and that's behavior intervention.
Yes.
The state has a modified form of in-home care like that, but the behavior intervention program is much more intense. And I've seen family after family in which the birth family would have lost these children, the system would have taken these children away were it not for the behavior intervention, when workers are coming into the home and helping that family stay together and cope with some very difficult problems with foster children, with children who would otherwise end up in the foster care
Right,
system.
and they also work with, of course, folks who are foster parents, who have children,
Right.
who have these high needs. And the thought processes, which I love, is number one, when we send our kids to these residential placements, it's not real life, right? We send them to a hospital setting and they're doing okay in the hospital setting, but as soon as they get home, they have the same behaviors, they may have picked up new ones, and there's no one there to support the parents. And so with BI, like, hey, we're not going to remove these kids because we have this solution that's
Yeah.
going to be put into place.
I
So
agree.
preventative measures, right?